The train is at capacity, a dense somatic field of proximity. Yet, the auditory load is zero. Silence here isn't an absence. It is a deliberate container for collective nervous system regulation. Observe the parasympathetic signaling. No frantic dopamine loops or scrolling, just the low hum of the ballast and a profound commitment to micro-rest amidst the machinery of the city. 6:14 a.m. Tokyo. While the West is still battling the snooze button, the ritual of discipline has already initiated. This isn't about hustle. It's about the compound power of intentionality. The platform moves with zero kinetic friction, no aggressive posturing. This is social architecture at its peak, a flow state achieved, not through speed, but through the elimination of unnecessary resistance. Contrast this with the Sydney CBD. We are sympathetic dominant, redlining on caffeine and tall poppy anxiety. We're rushing toward burnout, confusing frantic movement with actual progress. Look at your hand. You're at a Melbourne tram stop, but your nervous system is already locked in a high beta state. That frantic scrolling? It's a micro spike of cortisol before you've even had your first flat white. This is cognitive saturation. We are flooding our prefrontal cortex with more data packets in a single commute than your ancestors processed in an entire month. Your synaptic load is hitting its threshold. It's not just stress, it's the systematic erosion of your somatic regulation. This digital noise is quietly dismantling your capacity to find stillness in the chaos of the CBD. Think of your focus like clear water. This constant stimulation is a drop of ink. It doesn't scream, it just dissolves. Your patience, your deep sleep cycles, your Iki, your fundamental reason for being. Eventually, the clarity is gone. You aren't living. You're just managing an allostatic load that was never meant to be this heavy. Everything meaningful is dissolving in the background. Look closely. This isn't a lack of ambition. It's a masterclass in nervous system regulation. While the Sydney CBD hunts for the next stimulant, this quiet breath is a deliberate choice to downregulate before the storm begins. These habits aren't just cultural quirks. They are biohacks for the human spirit. In our world, we've been conditioned to hunt for the dopamine spike, the loud win, the viral moment. But the master calligrapher isn't chasing a hit. This is about endurance. It's the slow, steady preparation of the self to withstand the friction of a long life. True emotional homeostasis means finding your center even when the world is pulling you in 10 different directions. You need an anchor that doesn't rely on external validation. You need a way to survive the ordinary without being consumed by the mundane. The secret isn't intensity. It's the compounding of micro-habits. We overestimate the big break and underestimate the rhythmic repetition of the small. The monk doesn't sweep to clean the floor. He sweeps to clean his mind, one stroke at a time for decades. Most people ignore these movements because they look too small to matter. They're looking for a mountain to climb while ignoring the pebbles in their shoes. But in the realm of somatic change, the smallest action is often the most revolutionary. Consistency is the ultimate somatic reset. When you stop chasing the peak state dopamine spike and settle into the quiet ritual, you stop performing a habit, you begin hardwiring a new identity into your nervous system. Kaizen. In the hyperstimulated noise of the Sydney CBD, we are conditioned to value disruption. But true somatic mastery begins with the invisible. Kaizen is the 1% adjustment that bypasses the brain's threat response. We see it on every gym floor from Perth to Brisbane. The violent attempt at reinvention. They demand a 30-day overhaul, but their biology cannot sustain the weight of a forced inorganic transformation. Modern culture thrives on dramatic beginnings and high-intensity aesthetics. We seek the narrative arc of the total transformation, ignoring the homeostatic reality of the human animal. We want the fireworks, not the slow-burn furnace. The collapse is inevitable by week 3. Your brain interprets violent change as a threat to survival, triggering a regression to old safety patterns. You don't need more willpower, you need a smaller entry point. Kaizen isn't a weapon, it's a somatic recalibration. By lowering the stakes, we bypass the amygdala's alarm system entirely. We eliminate neural friction before the ego can even mount a defense. In the quiet discipline of the shokunin, improvement is never a spectacle. A chef adjusts the blade's pitch by a mere degree. It is not about the cut, it is about the somatic precision of the nervous system. Apply this to the Sydney CBD or the high rises of Barangaroo. Shutting the laptop 60 seconds earlier isn't laziness. It's a strategic withdrawal. It is the microregulation of your cortisol baseline. These are marginal gains in the architecture of your life. Unnoticeable today, but they prevent the structural collapse of burnout. You aren't just growing, you are hardening your resilience through compound behavior. Westerners crave the peak, but the Japanese master the plateau. One page, one breath, 1 minute. This is how you rewire a nervous system that has been screaming for years. This is how you quietly win. One sunrise trek along the Kuji coastal path is a single data point. A month is a neural reset. You are down regulating your sympathetic nervous system before the Sydney CBD even wakes up. It's not an instant fix, it's biorhythmic alignment. Nature doesn't optimize for a quarterly review. It functions through the cumulative pressure of single drops. Real discipline isn't a dopamine spike. It is the molecular erosion of your resistance through steady, quiet repetition. We've been conditioned to fear the quiet, but low arousal consistency is where the mastery lies. The unseen labor of showing up when it feels mundane is what prevents the tall poppy from snapping in the storm. In the rush for the next promotion, we lost our ontological anchor. We replaced our why with a KPI. But the Japanese concept of Ikigai isn't about productivity. It's about the soul's resonance with its daily work. If you are staring at a screen in a dark office at 8 p.m., you are suffering from existential atrophy. You aren't fulfilling an obligation. You are neglecting the fundamental spark that makes the heavy lifting of life worth the somatic cost. In Okinawa, where longevity isn't a performance metric but a byproduct of somatic rhythm, they don't hunt for a vision. They wake with an integrated purpose. Not the high arousal ambition of a Sydney C-suite promotion. Purpose, a garden, a craft, the tactile regulation of making soup. These are the anchors of the nervous system. We crave neurological dopamine spikes, but the psyche requires a baseline of simple meaning. Depth isn't found in volume, it's found in the compound resonance of the mundane. Our Western conditioning, especially in our frantic CBDs, shouts that purpose must be loud, global, and monetized. It is a false signal leading to ontological exhaustion. I see it daily from Barangaroo to Collins Street. You don't collapse from a lack of success. You collapse when your nervous system realizes your success carries no weight. That existential drift reveals itself in the blue light vacuum of the midnight scroll. When the apartment is quiet, the emptiness isn't just a feeling. It is a somatic feedback loop telling you that your nervous system has no anchor. When the screen locks, the digital dopamine stops masking the ontological void. You are finally left alone with the self you have been neglecting for the sake of the Sydney CBD grind. That silence scares most Australians now. We've built high-velocity routines around tall poppy competitiveness and corporate ambition, but we failed to build a reason for when the noise stops. To fix this, we look to Hara Hachi Bu. It sounds like a simple health hack, but it is actually a profound act of somatic regulation. Stop eating when you are 80% full. In the West, and especially in our rushed lunch break culture, consumption has become a sedative. We eat while navigating Melbourne trams or checking emails to escape the friction of our own lives. Your nervous system is drowning in stochastic noise. High glucose spikes, blue light saturation, the perpetual hum of the Sydney CBD. It's an environment of total sensory excess that keeps you in a state of chronic sympathetic arousal. Hara Hachibu is the somatic circuit breaker. It is not a caloric restriction. It is a ritual of intentional satiation. By stopping at 80%, you prioritize visceral awareness over the numbing comfort of a food coma. The inquiry is simple but lethal to the ego. Does this addition serve my equilibrium? In a culture obsessed with more, choosing to leave the space empty is the most radical act of self-regulation you can perform. Most modern suffering is just the attrition of unconscious consumption. We carry the weight of content we never enjoyed and stress we voluntarily invited in. We are metabolizing garbage and wondering why our spirits are heavy. But somatic regulation requires more than just silence. It needs a countersignal. Shinrin-yoku forest bathing is the Japanese recognition that nature isn't just a backdrop for a weekend hike. It is a clinical intervention for the soul. Shinrin-yoku isn't leisure, it is a clinical intervention. We are shifting from the CBD's hypervigilance to a state of visceral homeostasis. This isn't entertainment. It is the physiological medicine of the Australian bush. By the metrics of the Melbourne hustle, this is wasted time. Zero output. And yet, this is where the prefrontal cortex finally exhales. You are flushing the cortisol out of your system with every salt-heavy breath. Most of you haven't experienced true silence in years. You've traded rest for a sensory deluge. Even in the gym, you're wired into a digital feed constant input, constant nervous system friction. Your anxiety isn't a character flaw. It is a structural response to an environment your biology wasn't built for. The nervous system cannot sustain uninterrupted stimulation without eventually fracturing. True recovery looks painfully unimpressive. It has no vanity. It is just you, a quiet park, and the radical act of refusing to be occupied. This is how you recalibrate. This is how you survive the noise. Now, We tackle the cognitive toxin that is paralyzing your neuroplasticity, a concept modern Western culture struggles to even perceive without immediate defensive ego projection. Wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is the somatic release from the lie of the finished state. It is the radical acceptance that biological existence is inherently entropic, incomplete, transient, and flawed. Like this cracked ceramic, your history is etched into your form. From the Sydney CBD to the digital feed, we are conditioned for hyper-perfection. We've turned our identities into polished commodities. We are overclocking our nervous systems to maintain a curated baseline that is biologically impossible. But perfection is a mechanical demand placed on a biological system. When the structural load exceeds your capacity, you don't fail in a moral sense. You break in a physiological one. This isn't a character flaw. It is a system collapse. Wabi-sabi recalibrates your metric of worth. The gold isn't there to hide the break. It's there to honor it. Your burnout, your scars, your exhaustion, they aren't glitches in the machine. They are the signature of your humanity. Japanese discipline isn't a performative Sydney hustle. It doesn't scream for external validation or a LinkedIn update. It is a low arousal, consistent pulse. It simply persists, quietly. Again, tomorrow. Western optimization culture mistakes intensity for progress. But your nervous system doesn't need a high cortisol sprint. Real discipline is the mastery of emotional stability, the capacity to engage your life without the constant spike of fight or flight response. True grit is the absence of theatricality. It is the ability to continue without needing a dopamine hit from constant excitement, to carry your struggles with a quiet, internal dignity, rather than turning your burnout into a social performance. These somatic shifts won't provide a sudden life hack epiphany, but through compound behavior, your baseline shifts. Years later, you realize the mental static of the CBD has faded. Your life has become intentional, stable, and unshakable. Discipline isn't a cage. It's the bridge back to your authentic self. Not the version the city demands, but the one that knows how to breathe, quietly. Again, tomorrow.